Jeff Chittister, and New Hampshire Perspective.
And welcome back to New Hampshire Perspective with Jeff Chittister. I'm Jennifer Wells.
And I'm Jenn Coffey, and we have taken it over.
Exactly. And I'd like to welcome in our guest right now. It's Ben Swann. He is part of a new project that's, taking hold. It's Liberty is Rising Truth in Media project. And let's go ahead and bring him into the conversation. Good morning, Ben. How are you?
Good morning, Jen. How are you all?
Thanks for joining us this morning.
You're being double tagged by Jen, so.
That's right.
So we've been hearing, we're really excited about what we've seen online from you. And one of the issues we've been hearing a lot about is the NSA and their use of American citizens' cell phone records, among other things, to spy on Americans. And my understanding is this is being done without search warrants. What have you found through your investigations on this issue to be true or false, and what the public has been told about this issue?
Well, the biggest problem with it is a lot of what the public has been told is simply untrue. Let's start with the fact that the idea that all of this is legal is untrue. Now, what you've heard members of Congress say, you've heard the NSA say, is that under the FISA Act, under the Patriot Act, that this kind of collection of phone records and collection of metadata, it's all perfectly legal as far as terrorism investigations. And that's only half true. You can only collect, as part of NSA, this metadata on phone calls. You can only collect the information through these web engines, search engines like Google and Microsoft and AOL and all these different places. You can only do that if you can prove that the people that you are investigating have a link to a terrorism investigation. That's even under the Patriot Act. So the Patriot Act, and I think most people would recognize, whether you're a fan of it or not, the Patriot Act goes far beyond the Constitution in the rights and the authority that it grants the government. And so when the feds use the Patriot Act, and it goes far beyond, again, the Constitution, even with the far-reaching overreaches of the Patriot Act, what the NSA has been doing does not fall within the context of the Patriot Act because they've been collecting this information on every American who's using a wireless phone. So regardless of whether or not those people are involved in the terrorism investigation, regardless of what they're involved in, that information has been collected on those Americans. There's been no facts to prove that all those hundreds of millions of people had been connected to a foreign investigation. And so, therefore, what the NSA has been doing is clearly illegal, even by those standards.
Now, Ben, you did a recent video about the NSA. Can you explain to our listeners, because you were very eloquent in that, breaking down this whole NSA scandal. Can you give our listeners a little bit of background of that video?
Sure. The idea behind the video is we want to run through, again, rule of law is what we really focus on. Mm-hmm. The idea behind what we're doing is saying, look, there's so much left-right paradigm built into news media today that it's very difficult for people to be able to really hear what facts are because everything is going through this prism of whether you're coming from the right or you're coming from the left. And so no one's arguing, again, rule of law, and that's what the video does. Is it explains to people the situation, exactly what the NSA had been doing, and then under rule of law, whether it was legal or not. Look, there's so much talk right now about Edward Snowden, and Snowden is part of the story, but he's a sideshow to what the actual story is. Right. Was Snowden a whistleblower or not? Well, the fact is he was a whistleblower if what the NSA was doing was illegal. And so what we show in the video is why what the NSA was doing and is doing is illegal. And we break it down for people, again, not giving you my opinion, not giving you, according to Republicans it was okay, according to Democrats it was okay. What we're doing is we're showing you by rule of law why the NSA was overreaching and how it affects really every American's life.
Right. And Ben, just for clarification, there hasn't I haven't seen any news reports on what exactly Edward Snowden leaked. Was it just the fact that this program is happening, or was there more information behind that?
Well, he leaked actually a couple of things. He leaked the fact that the program was happening in the first place and what the program consisted of. So he explained the Verizon part of it. He explained the metadata to the UK Guardian. He explained a lot of what the process was and how the collection was taking place. He also explained that this collection was taking place through a backdoor channel into Google, into Facebook, into AOL. So he gave that information. Later, after that initial interview, he also came back and said that the U.S. had been spying on foreign presidents when one of them was here for a G20 summit. They had hacked his email. And so he's given out quite a bit of information about what these programs have consisted of. It's fascinating that he would mention that, though, at a time when the U.S. keeps claiming we need CISPA, we need SOPA, and we need PIPA, all these acronyms for Internet protection bills, because they keep saying the Chinese are going to hack us. Meanwhile, we're hacking foreign dignitaries left and right.
Right. Now, if people want to see the video that we're talking about, where can they go?
You can go to benswann.com. It's BENSWANN.com. Right there on the homepage, there's a banner at the top. You can click on it. You can watch the video for yourself. It's about, I think, total 8 minutes long, so we get into some pretty good detail on it. But again, what we try to do is put everything in context. So you're not going to get kind of the drive-by news with us or just someone reading headlines. We're trying to get into context and into depth on these stories. So go to benswann.com. You can watch the video for yourself. And then also on that page, you can leave comments about it or upload your own content. And we're asking for people to give continued insight and upvote stories that they think are important, because obviously the Snowden story, the NSA story, is changing every day.
Absolutely. Now, Ben, you've had a very successful career as a broadcast journalist, so you know the ins and outs of the business. So why do a project like this, and what exactly are you hoping will happen because of your project?
Well, what we're doing is we've launched this Truth in Media project on Kickstarter. We're crowdsourcing right now to try to create 100 episodes of Ben Swann Full Disclosure. That is the show that folks will see if they go to benswann.com. That's the first episode that we have up there. But we're crowdsourcing to do this, and the idea is to break through this left-right paradigm, specifically reaching out to independent voters and to younger people, liberty-minded people who aren't necessarily connected to any political party, but clearly see that political parties are broken. And so what we're trying to do is say, look, Jon Stewart is not necessarily the best source for news, and yet that's where most of these people are going for news.
Right.
And Jon Stewart does some things very well, by the way. But that's not to say that he by his own admission, is a comedian. He calls out hypocrisy. But what we want to do is restore journalism so that it's accountable to the people and it responds to the people as opposed to responding to corporations or to political party.
I was, Ben, I was really attracted to a sentence that you wrote on your website that I think kind of sums a lot of what you've been saying up. And I'm going to quote you. "We are speaking truth to power through media, culture, and technology to empower the voice of the people toward liberty and freedom." And I just think that's an amazing comment, and I wanted to read that out there for our listeners. Would you elaborate more, about the Kickstart program? Do you have some big time backer that's throwing all of this for you, or is this really the people?
This is the people. This is all grassroots. Look, our average donation right now, I think, is $67. And a lot of our people, you're able to contribute different levels. Our highest right now is $10 donations that are coming to us. $10 from people who are saying, listen, I'll support this. And that's the way we want it. We don't want one or two big money folks to come in and say, hey, I'll give you a bunch of money, and then you say what I want you to say. What we're looking is to be the voice of the people. And so 100,000 people at $10 a piece, and we're there. And that's what we're looking for. Is we're looking for people who will get behind us and say, I don't have a lot to give, but I'll forego the Starbucks venti today, and I'll forego one movie theater ticket this week just so I can contribute to this project, which will fund episodes, for an entire season. So that's what we're looking for, is grassroots. And so far, the grassroots has been amazing. People have come out, thousands so far, who are saying we want to get behind this project and we want to support it.
Right.
We've got 31 days left to do it in, and we believe that people will do it.
It's kind of interesting noting all of that, because if you think back, journalism at one point didn't care whether you were left, right, whatever. If there was something bad going on, they would investigate it, they would report it, and it would be unbiased. And that just doesn't seem to be the norm. And is that part of why you decided to do this?
Oh, absolutely. What we realized, especially during this last presidential election, during the Republican primary, I picked up a lot of traction because I started talking about the fact that a lot of the positions that Congressman Ron Paul had were not getting airtime. And it wasn't because I was a Paul supporter per se. I actually didn't know much about him. But I saw this guy who was a candidate who had a lot of grassroots support, and no one in media would talk about it. And what we've seen is, and then I've got involved in that, and you start finding out much more about it. But what I've come to find is that Ron Paul was a guy who was a great example of media bias. The left didn't like him because he was a threat. The right didn't like him because he was a threat. And so media just wouldn't talk about him, despite the fact that he had all these crowds and huge numbers of supporters and all these people who were backing him. I mean, this is a guy who holds the record for the single largest fundraising day in U.S. political history, and yet no one wants to talk about him. And so what we found was, well, if that's true in that case, where else is it true? I covered the drug war in Mexico for a lot of years. That's where I really first started realizing about media bias, covering the drug war and realizing what was actually going on and trying to get networks and trying to get reporters in other parts of the country to pay attention. And nobody would report truth on the matter. They were reporting political spin to however it fit the political parties. And so the goal is to say, look, exactly what you said. Truth does not have a bias toward any political party. Both political parties in this country are corrupted. Mm-hmm. Power corrupts people. And journalists and journalism is supposed to hold those in power accountable, and it's not doing that. Right now, it's really acting as a sounding board and a megaphone for those political forces, and we want to break that.
Now, Ben, you do a lot of speaking engagements. What's the most common question that you get from your audience? Is there one?
I think there is. I think the most common question has to be, is media controlled by corporations in order to control the people? And is the bias really about controlling people? I don't think it is. I think the majority of what's happening in the media today, the majority, are actually just, it's a problem of groupthink. That so many journalists are in these newsrooms and no one's thinking differently. No one's challenging the status quo. And so it's not so much that there's a big media conspiracy. Now, maybe at the very highest level, there is collusion going on, and no doubt there probably is to some extent. But on the lower levels, I don't think it's so much that as it is, it's just a groupthink issue. They all think the same. And when you do have a different thought or a different idea and you start challenging status quo, you're kind of pushed to the outer regions and told, hey, we don't want to hear any of that. We're not interested in that. So I think that's where there's a big shift that could come, again, through this project. One of the things we're trying to do is it's one part information, our platform, one part engagement, and one part activation. And so what we want to do is we want to activate people and engage them in the process so that we can make serious change. And that means with student groups, with journalist groups, we want to do more than just put out media. We actually want to really affect the culture in a way that says there is a different way of thinking about all these things that are happening in our country. It doesn't mean that you have to become violent.
Right.
We just want to educate people and then change with the system. Because I think the founders and the framers did a really good job of giving us the ability to change our society in a peaceful way. And that's the way we have to do it.
So basically, if I'm understanding you correctly, and for clarification for our listeners, is what you're saying is that the media is basically giving out the same information. Doesn't matter what station, doesn't matter, what TV you tune into. They're all kind of giving that, and by doing that, they're actually disenfranchising the voters from the truth.
Oh, absolutely. Look, you guys have seen those clips that I think Conan O'Brien does where he finds that one news story and they're all reading the exact same thing on the exact same day.
Yep.
It's funny, but it's also very sad. And by the way, the station that I was at, one of our anchors made one of those reels at one point. And it's sad. I mean, they would laugh at it in our newsroom, but at the same time, you're kind of hanging your head saying, what are we doing here, guys? Exactly. This is what we've created. It's the system of it's an echo chamber of the same 4 or 5 stories, and most of it, quite frankly, isn't important to the national conversation at all.
Which is
so that's what we want to see change, yeah.
And we agree with you, which is why we've got the Jenn and Jenn segment.
Exactly. And again, you're listening to New Hampshire Perspective with Jenn and Jenn. We're talking to Ben Swann of Ben Swann. Full disclosure, you can find out more about him online at benswann.com. That's SWANN. You can also find more about Liberty is Rising Truth in Media Project at Kickstarter.com. So, Ben, before we let you go, I just had one more question. Do you find that people are more disenfranchised today with both parties, and there is a movement towards like a Ron Paul, liberty-minded party?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's no question about that. At the end of the day, people are moving away from the parties because they've seen that they're really, I've heard people say it before, so it's not my phrase, but they're two wings on the same bird.
Right.
The problem is that crony capitalism in this country, the nanny state, all of it is the product of both parties. It's not one over the other. What I think most people have found is that the parties aren't responding to them, and so they're just checking out.
Right.
What we have to do is work to tell people, wait, don't check out of the system. We need to fix the system. We need to fix the two-party system in this country. We need to fix media in this country. We need to fix the education system. We need to fix the political system. And the only way to do that, I believe, is to start by re-engaging people, and that happens with media. If we don't do it through media, and you guys know this as well as I do, if you do not do it through media, you're not going to get it done.
Right.
Because that is the language people speak in this country, in this century. That's how we speak to each other, is through media.
Exactly, because you may not want to get into politics, but politics is going to get into every aspect of your life, because every decision they make, every vote that they take, affects you whether you're paying attention or not. We really want to thank you for taking time out of your day today to spend with Jenn and Jenn.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And good luck with the project, Ben.
Thanks.
I thank Ben for joining us today, and we're going to take a quick break from the Jenn and Jenn takeover of the New Hampshire Perspective of the Jeff Chittister Show, brought to you live on News Radio 610 96.7 WGIR. And don't forget, folks, check out our Facebook fan page, J2J. We'll be right back.